Today I made over $13,000 day trading ES, but I was almost red. This one important thing helped me flip my bias and get on the right side. Let's get into it. So this was the trade right here. This was an ES long, a trade in which I had taken with my community. Now, first things first, what was my original bias? Well, if we look at the post I sent to my Discord, I said bias. On live, London lows met on NQ currently have bullish S&T off it. The reaction will clarify bias through the opening range move. Closure under equals downside. Sweep equals validation of SMT plus bullish into range. So looking at NQ here, NQ off the open was the weaker asset. Basically comparing ES and NQ together, what I do from time to time is I try to identify which index is the index in which is leading and which is weaker. And so that is able to help us because that gives us an extra piece of edge to our strategy. If we take, for example, a long on an asset which is more bullish, you're more probable into hitting price targets. But sometimes you could take a long in the weaker asset. So it's important to make sure which asset we're trading. Well, off the open, clearly NQ was the weaker asset. You could identify that through the open. You could also identify that when we take out these London lows. So if you look at NQ here, kind of coming off the open, we see NQ come down here, and we see NQ take out its London lows at 9:48 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, if you look at ES doesn't end up taking its London lows out all the way until 9:55 a.m. So ES takes out sell side 7 minutes after NQ does, which tells you that ES was what? It was the asset which was holding the range better. So for me, for coming into the open, I was initially bullish due to overnight data. So actually last night, I wanted to seek further downside, but we ended up seeing a very bullish sequence overnight. So for me specifically, kind of coming into the open, I wasn't going to more so look to counter this unless price clearly showed a higher time frame move, which it didn't, not necessarily for lower. And I needed to see clear displacement. Off the open, pretty bearish move. I then flipped my bias because we had seen this London low here and off the opening range move, which is the initial move of price off the open into an area of liquidity, we see price close under, right? Bearish sequence. However, here's the one thing that I did not mark out, which helped me sway my bias, right? Well, if you look at the higher time frame narrative aspect of what price was doing, we briefly look at the 4 hour, obviously before this 4 hour candle was met, we could clearly see there was a 4 hour gap in which we had seen price essentially tap into. This was a little bit after NQ had taken out its overnight lows. This is a bit after ES had taken out its overnight lows. We had seen NQ essentially tap near the CE of its 4 hour gap, whilst ES was just barely grazing it. Our low of day on ES is based off the 4 hour gap tap. NQ's low of day beforehand, before price now, was based off the 4 hour gap. So although we had seen an invalidation of these London lows here for a potential reversal back into range, we did see price tap this 4 hour imbalance, which acts equally in relevancy to this London low. So this 4 hour fair value gap is equally as fair and important as this low right here on NQ. You guys have to remember, right, chat, for anyone who's watching this in the Discord, the opening range move either just confirms or denies higher time frame bias, and higher time frame was never clear for me. What was clear then was once we tapped the 4 hour gap. We had seen a good move off the 4 hour. A great thing here as well, which was important, which helped us capitalize on longs for the short-term move. I wasn't expecting a major reversal all the way back up, eating all the selling pressure, right, that we had seen the past couple of days and weeks. I wasn't expecting that. I was simply waiting for probability in the markets where we could see a move happen via lower time frame, if that makes sense. So we put in a good low off a 4 hour gap tap last night. Then we had seen price come up here displaceively, and then we had seen New York come back down here and tap the 4 hour gap. On top of that, the original bullish SMT that we had, right, if you guys remember top of the video, we had bullish SMT off of these on lows, like we talked about in the bias. But then we didn't validate them. However, we created bullish SMT off the 4 hour gap fill. So NQ came down here, 4 hour gap fill filled. We see NQ create a lower low, a new low of day, whilst ES happened to create what? A higher low. ES created a higher low, whilst NQ created a lower low, which means there is bullish SMT. We then end up seeing price come up here. We then see price start to displace. If you guys know me, there's two main components when it comes to my MSS model. One, the low or the high for the reversal that we end up taking has to be a low put in off a level or an imbalance that is significant. So at minimum, it has to be an hourly, 4-hour daily fair value gap or inversion fair value gap. And through levels, it either has to be, a higher time frame level, a gap, or overnight higher lows, right? If that makes sense. So we end up seeing that happen here. We do see price accumulate for quite a bit, but then eventually we see price come up here and we see price offer a 5-minute inversion fair value gap entry. What I will say about the entry model here, was it the best? No, not necessarily. But the reason you see me take this off this gap is because of the fact that we not only did we have a 5-minute gap go invert, and not only was it the only gap in zone, but it also was a 1-minute breakup structure of this consolidation. So you guys saw we were consolidation prone with this 5-minute gap, just kept on fighting it, right? Alongside that, with that 5-minute gap, we inverted a 1-minute gap here. And this is the best 1-minute gap in zone out of the breakup structure to more so target. Again, when it comes to reversal, MSS model, we're looking for those 2 key components. And then on top of that, we're looking for price to simply displace. We eventually come up here. Our stop placement was the relative low. For me, in my opinion, I felt had price given us a confirmation entry, there was no reason for price to come down here into the swing low to trade back up higher, in my opinion. I felt if displacement was there and confirmation was clear, price being so bullish coming into confirmation shouldn't need that big of a retracement. So good invalidation zone. I felt if price came down here and tagged these lows, we would most likely see lows again. These low of days, or excuse me, this low of day that we had placed on ES. We then see price come in. Target 1 was based off a 5-minute and 15-minute gap, fair value gap CE. Target 2 was based off this 15-minute gap fill. So we end up taking this trade. Trade realizes for about a 1 hour, but a beautiful trade taken with the community. Obviously, very much so alerted, right? I am long, then I am breaking even stops, boom, take profit is taken. I did, so for me, and in the Discord, the way we risk is very defined. It's based off R, right? If you guys don't know. So we have set dollar risk defined for every single day, every single trade that we take. So it's very easy to keep up via R-wise, right? That's a lot more realistic of an approach for people because realistically, like how many people are going to make $13,000 off this trade right here like I did, right? It's not realistic. So we go based off R. And so for me specifically, we have different ways on how we scale and trim based off what type of account you have. And so for me, trimmed all on my consistency accounts, trimmed barely on my personal because I more so look for R there, and then I trimmed half on a couple other accounts. So it depends on what you did here, but your realization could be a 1R, it cannot. It really just depends on which you decide to go with, right? I'd show you guys, but obviously the link is there. It's under the Lanto models section in the Discord. And we essentially, again, risk based off that. So very clear. And we end up taking this trade, see a good move, go risk free, and essentially hit take profit. So a beautiful trade in a day that really did not do much up until, quite literally recently. Very choppy, took lows. Then we eventually see price, offer us entry. We take the entry comfortably and we simply scalp. Once price, had came back down and then, essentially tagged out, the runners, we end up seeing price just kind of consolidate. That's when I decided to call it and had a bit of a narration with the community right here. And we end up seeing price ultimately slow down here up until the last couple candles. So yeah, pretty productive day. Well done. Stood patient. One thing I do want to mention as well is the importance of patience. You guys see me be green here today, but you have to remember, I was on live since 9:30 a.m. We don't end up taking this trade until 10:56 a.m. So we don't take a trade until an hour and a half of sitting down and waiting. That is the level of patience required for a trader. Make sure you remember that. So yeah, with that being said, that's a recap. Hopefully you guys enjoyed and keep on going.